Well, this morning we're going to start this lovely watercolour that I put together, this photograph with the snow leopard in. In fact, I would like to use a paper twice this size really, because I'd like to have done the animals larger. But we have to work on a fairly small scale on this very complicated composition and drawing. It's going to include nearly all the methods of using watercolour that we've been doing in all of the previous series to the foundation. I may even then come back and do the leopard as a larger animal later, because I want to play with the texture more with the brushes and so on, and show you that at a later date, maybe straight after this. But for the moment we need to put masking fluid on, and the masking fluid needs to be here where this tree is, and all these little details here, down the icicles and so on and around here. So we're going to use masking fluid on these very textural areas, and then I'm going to use a bit of salt in places as well. So we'll be using both of those. So masking fluid first of all then. Now to do that, rather than using an applicator, a normal needle applicator and so on, I've just sharpened up the end of a paintbrush this time, and I literally want to go on doing dots and dashes and little lines with that this morning, just to get this feeling of these bits of frost in the on the end of the twigs and the branches here. Now you can use clay shapers for this, you can use special pens for this, there's all sorts, but I mean at the moment just this piece of sharpened brush is doing the job. There we are, that's about got that done I think there, what I want. Now it's come down to these areas of icicles and things around here, and where I'm doing this in fact as well, I'm going to have to come back and tint them down a bit later. Right, hopefully that's about enough for there. That should do that. So we'll let those dry off now. This morning, as you can see, it's a fairly detailed drawing this time. Needs to be, because although it's a fairly small scale, I've got to go into detail on a lot of these things, so I have to know where my paint's going to go. I still only need to paint within lines. I haven't had to do any shading or too much textural detail. It's just to know where colours are going to be going all over this. And I've got my photographs of course ready there to use, and one of the first things I'm going to go on to is in fact this snow leopard. Now, because the snow leopard is fairly small in drawing, I shan't be doing a lot of textural work. I'm going to use both my sets of watercolour this time, both the Russian and the English, because I want both delicate and heavier marks. So I can't paint above it in this area yet, but I can start to work on the leopard itself. Now, I've set myself up over here with a little table to one side, and my paints there so I can get at them, and then the main drawing board here, my studies above, brushes there where I can get at them. I need my camera just here, best I can to look over my shoulder for you. So we'll make a start, and the brush of my first choice is this De La Rowney number 8 round, and I need to work up again lights to darks here. First of all using just glazes, and then I'm going to come in with darker shapes in between the fur and gradually work up with probably a rake to do some of the furry effects as well. So first of all what I want to get is the underpainting of this snow leopard, and that I'm going to do with just raw sienna at the moment, and maybe a touch of yellow or cadmium orange into it later. So first of all a nice thin wash coming down here into the snow leopard, just blending it out. And I've got to get the soft lights and darks as it comes down its back into here. So I'm thinning that down a little bit as it comes down here, working my way into the back of the leg, leaving a light area there. And it's quite light over its head here, right over there. Get some cools going down into the face here in a moment, light around under its chin, quite yellow just there. So here I'm going to take a little bit of my cadmium yellow, just make it a touch yellower in these places here. It comes around there, slightly more golden into there, very slight change in tint as it comes down around here. So we've got the warmer yellow and then this slightly cooler, although this yellow is quite bright, down into the paw here, letting that come round there softly. Now into that, while it's still damp, I can take a little bit of my cobalt violet, and I made it to be a little bit stronger than I think, because I always forget with watercolour that, I don't always forget, but I often forget with watercolour that of course it's going to dry lighter later, so I need to be just a little bit darker. It wants to be a bit darker against the snow behind, as I can see now, so I'm going to have to make it just a little bit darker in a moment. Cobalt violet, very useful colour, one you can't make, you've got to buy it. Just lift it out of there. I want it a bit lighter just there, so I'll just suck it out there carefully. A bit stronger with those colours. So I'm going to take my cadmium orange and a wee touch of burnt sienna, just to start to darken down this rich, warm texturing back here, down into here, before I start doing any detail with the fur. So I want to be a bit warmer against the snow, in other words. Down here, down this leg, right down around that foot, to there. Quite warm down there. Dropping it wet into wet at the moment. So we'll let that dry down, and while that's drying down, while it's still wet, to drop in a little bit more cool. I had my cobalt violet just now. Take some of the cobalt violet and add to it a little bit of cerulean blue, because I want to start dropping in some shadow down here, soft shadow. A wee bit stronger down here, front of his paw, certainly stronger up and round this bit. Now I'm going to add a little bit of cobalt to that to make it stronger still. So my cobalt violet and cobalt blue to go even stronger into here. Still just doing it wet into wet, just letting those soft effects come in. Right up and through there. We'll see how this is going to work in a minute when I do the furry effects. Right, now I'm going to move on to my small rake and mix up a reddish purple. So I'm going to take a little bit of rose and a little bit of actual purple, and just use this brush to start to work in some fur effects by using little strokes. Don't want them too sharp. So say it's such a small scale this that I haven't got to put too much on. But when I do the larger one for you, we'll see more texture. It must still be a bit damper than I thought, because it's not quite leaving the texture, so I'll have to come back into that when it's a bit drier. Right, now I'm going to come down to some ultramarine blue and just start to bring some slightly stronger shadows and texturing into the edges of these bits of fur. That might seem quite strong at the moment, but as I say, once we get the darker colours on, I think it'll start to make more sense to you. We can use the brush sideways slightly as well there, you see. Even with the shadow under the actual cat itself here, I want to start putting that blue in now. I can use the brush, as I said, use the brush sideways as well, just to get the shading right. So we've got the cat's furriness. Now I want to start on the darks. I'm going to do the darks with the small round brush first of all, and then come back with this brush and just drag some of those darks out a little bit. Go and let it dry a moment. Alright, now it's time to start putting on these darks, and be very careful, but we put them on both at the moment with little dots and dashes and slightly heavier. Use the paint a bit more thinly on the outer edges here, just to get the feeling of how the lights can go into the darks. Now back with my little rake brush, and as I said, I want to just drag out some of this fur just slightly. I'm going to come back into there in a minute and put even more darks just back into there. As it comes around here, it just runs into the dark. And those shadows then come across here, and it gets quite dark into there. Right up and round his shoulder here. Now I'm going to take a little bit of black. I don't normally use it, but in this case, because he's close to us, I do want to make sure that these darks really are dark. I'm going to drop some of those real darks, a little touch of black into it, to really bring out these darker areas. Hopefully we've got the feeling of the snow leopard with the shadows and the darks we needed. Now I think we've just about got him as much detail as we require in this particular painting. Bring this out a bit. The same colours coming out in front of him. Just up to under his chin here. Beautiful colours. There we go, we'll let that dry off. In the meantime, it looks like the masking fluid is almost dry enough to work on. Let's go across to the otter over to the left. Back to my little round brush again. And it shouldn't be too difficult to do this one. I want a little bit of cool first of all, so a wee touch of the ultramarine just on the nose here. A little touch of that yellow, that warm yellow just coming in thinly under here into that blue. And I want a coat of fairly deep, use some of the dark that we used earlier which had the blue in it. And he's surely silhouetted against the snow over here anyway. So just let a little bit of the sparkle of the paper come through there as well. Don't want too much detail there. Come down his bib here to his dark little paw that's coming over here. I want to drop a bit more dark into there, so I'm going to go just a little bit darker again. And we'll just try and drop in that little bit more dark at the back. Here especially. Come around that tail there. There we go. And we'll reflect him just slightly in the water here, I think. So where his reflection was here, we'll just pick up a little more. Right, I want to start working into my sky now, so I'm going to start working with the oval mop. This is quite major, so I've got to work from lights to darks and leave light areas behind as well. And what I'm going to want first is a little coat of a cool yellow. So I'm going to go straight away from my aureolin and just give these mountains up here a hint of a cool yellow right through there. It's light, it's whiter down here, in fact, where it's fraction cooler. Now onto my pinker colours up there. I'm going to go for my favourite, the cobalt violet. First of all, as a light colour with a little bit of yellow going into it in just a moment. So up here I want this cobalt violet coming right through here. So I'm going to work wet next to wet and wet into wet very rapidly I want a slightly warmer yellow coming in there. So I'll mix it in while it's wet into wet. Right up through here. That's already letting that stand out lighter. One thing just coming into another there. A little bit bluer there now, a little bit more purple coming down here. Not too much so, but just enough to softly come down into these hills. Right through here, up into there. Let this wet into wet do the work. It's going upwards as well as downwards, you see. I can get harder edges again a bit later when I need them. Just here where we're going to put some real darks in just a moment, but I just want to let it dry back a fraction more yet. Now up into here where we've got more soft bluey pinks. Again, some cobalt violet again. And we need to get all of that area wet. All the way down here, right to the edge of those mountains. Much warmer in just a moment. Now a little bit of cobalt violet again into here. A bit lighter. Now, I've really got to start hitting with the darks, so I'm going to mix up a much deeper blue with a little touch of brown into it. I've really got to start coming into this now, getting these lovely furry effects right through here. Coming into there, tickling right through here. I'm going to go much stronger into here in just a moment. You see now why I wanted the wet into wet, because I want to get these soft effects of the clouds, and why I went lighter there as well. Coming right through here. Don't want any hard edges there. I'm going to drop really dark in just a moment. This is just a beginning, I assure you. Right through there, coming down into here, where it's going to hopefully just drop down, drop in some more ultramarine where it's required. Various different blues going on in here that I need. Right down across the misty mountain tops there. Just around here. Now I've got to go even darker still. I've got to go warmer, in fact. I've got to add more of the burnt sienna, a lot more of the brown into it up here, so it goes a sort of greeny brown, much stormier. Right round those edges, down through here. Now I want to go really dark. This is where I'm going to start using my other colours to really hit it with some deep, rich, deep darks. I really want this to be very, very dark. Up here, that's better. So I'm using now my cheaper paints to drop into here to get these darks that I want. 3 together, the Prussian, a little bit of black and some purple. I really want these darks here. We can soften that when we want to a bit later. Okay, now I'm going to go darker again. Believe it, but I'm going to drop in a bit more here and there, darker still. It's part way dry now. I'm just going to come back in and let this cloud come into here a little bit softer. Just there. Put a dry brush right through there before I do wet into wet again. Right, now whilst this is working, I'm going to drop in some darks here. Some really dark darks. just to get the soft effects of these mountains coming down and round, to be slightly harder edged in places, so I'll come back on these a bit later. This is a graduated, oh no, this is a graduated wash. Tickle these colours in, even bits of snow in between. Let them spread out a bit. We'll do harder edges later. Now, when I said graduated, that's graduating. Next I want to come into variegated, so I'm going to now take a blue and come along with the blue, joining into it. Take some ultramarine again, a bit short on ultramarine now. I'm hoping someone's going to come with some for me shortly. All the way along this edge. Lighter blue there that I'm going to use, a more acidic blue which I'm going to use for my Russian watercolours here. Comes down into that. More definition shortly when the paint's a bit drier. At the moment it's just to get some soft effects. Let that dry off a bit. I'm just going to lift a little bit of light out of the clouds here and there. Take my little round brush now and a little bit of cadmium orange. I just want to come in here and just drop in some of that as it comes right up into these areas here and links in down at the bottom. Maybe a little more warmth there as well. Maybe I just need to lift out one or two little bits here so that the mountains appear to come back through there a little bit more. And as the paint dries we can come back into some of these and work a little bit more sharply and bring out these bits of... Now back to my oval mop, and I want to start dropping in colours, a wash here. I'm going to start with a wash up to there for a start, all the way down through these trees to here. These are all techniques that I've just been showing you in the introductory one, and I've used a little bit of the cobalt violet again up here. Now I'm going to go to my turquoise, and I want a lovely turquoise going on over here. And I want some of that blue coming down through here into these colours. It's a beautiful blue, this turquoise blue. Just mistily showing through. We just want this idea of misty trees just glowing through here. Don't overdo it, just let the brush do the work and let the light stay. Don't do so much that you lose your lights. These trees here now are just, you can actually start to define, you can see where the drawing is and actually start to define them now. Mistiness between these. So I'm doing that now, just picking them out bit by bit. Even this tree back here now, I want to start getting the feeling of it by just letting it go wet into wet there. Let that come down with the light areas in between, down into there. We'll have the mist coming down, all the way down to there. Mist in between. This one here, lovely and dark. Let it spread out. Just the tips of these trees we're going to do now. We'll let the rest go into the mist. we'll go darker and darker, but we've got to let it dry in between. We can't just keep plonking colour in, we've got to gradually let it dry a bit. A little touch of green into my purple. So almost done that bit there. I just need to work into that a little bit later. Now I'm going to go a bit stronger here, but not too much water because it's very wet already, being wet into wet. Stronger and stronger and stronger fir trees. It's still very wet back there, so can't do too much or it'll just disintegrate into a meaningless mess. Right, now I want to go even stronger still with those darks, almost as dark as I did back up in the background there. So I'll take some of my stronger Russian colours and we'll start to just drop those in there to bring the whole thing forward, and we get the feeling of misty pine trees going back into the distance. Isn't that lovely? We can lift out of some of this as well, so we're going to get these darks in, but I'm also going to lift out of it in a moment. Right, leave that and we'll see if we can do a little bit of lifting out. So we let that dry, then we'll put a bit more paint over those tips and places just to make them a bit darker still and sharper. Right, it's all nice and dry, so all I've got to do now is come back here and just pick out the tops of some of these trees with a little more detail. A bit too wet at the moment, not too much water on the brush. Just to give the feeling of the tips of the trees coming over. To come back down to here now, back over to here, and just look at this tree, which is dark in here. We're just painting a few of these darker branches with that same deep blue. Just make these darks with ultramarine blue and a little bit of burnt sienna. Right, let that dry again. We'll rub off some of that masking fluid at the top later. Start on background to this now, and of two additional items, cling film and rock salt, both of which are going to help me to make further textures in this, both for the icicles and for texturing of the snow. Right, as an example, this little area here, let's just take a look at that. What I'm going to do is take some paint, obviously, and the paint I'm going to use there, and then I'm going to take some cling film, bundle it up and push it down onto there like that. I could put bigger bits on. For instance, if we were doing sails on a sailing boat, then I could use much larger pieces. So I just dropped in my cling film here on the wash there to try and get a texture in the background there, letting that dry off and letting that texture come up behind the cling film, which should stick onto it. I'm putting in a light yellow there, a bit of pink, a little bit of blue. Now I'm moving up to here. I want a wash of this right through here to go out into my paper. A bit more here. I'm just going to bring through these glazes here. Otter, who might need a little bit more strengthening yet, we'll see in a moment. A slight green tint coming down there, so I'm going to add a little touch of this to the yellows here. Now that's drying there, but what I want to do is just sprinkle a bit of salt onto here, and that will give some texturing. It's not really wet enough to get much texture there at the moment. Now we're talking about salt. Nice effects there, but also is a very good place to drop some salt. At a slight angle at the moment, but if I drop salt onto that, you should get some nice chunky effects. We could use finer salt, but this will just give me a few textures in the snow. You can already see it darkening down here, look. So that has to dry off. Must let that dry. I'm going to use water into this in a moment to again make it softer still. Coming over from where I've put here some masking fluid already. darker up here, down through these striations here, right down there. Bits of snow, light and darks. What the difference in texture already we're getting there. That's up through here, the snow and stuff. And it'll be very different to the marks I'm going to make in just a moment. So very fine marks down there. Now with clean water, just going to drop in a slight wash of water here, just to soften it a bit. It does want to be clean now, so I've got to really wash the brush out. Just flick some water off it and just let that soften into here, because I'm going to drop wet next to wet in just a moment here. Now that's a soft edge. Next I need to make a harder edge here, so I'm going to use the paint that's a bit warmer there. So coming in here with a nice sharp edge look, leaving those bits of white snow. A little bit of purple into that. A bit darker just over the top here, just a fraction. Dark down into the water there, just a little bit, which I haven't done. If I go lightly across there, I can just drag that brush to give dry brush across some of the snowy areas. Again, going darker, the stronger paint. I've got much stronger pigment on my brush now. I'm going to just drop in some darks. This is lightening up again, so I'm going to drop in a few little bits of dark just into there again, just to pick it out. These deep purple blues going on. Clean, sharp, neat, quick watercolour strokes. Now hopefully this is dry enough to lift off now. You can see we get a slight bit of texture in there. Not a lot, but just enough to stop it being just totally smooth like the paint would have been otherwise. Mustn't get too tied down with that. My big brush, I've got all three brushes in my hand at the moment. A big brush now and back up to here again. And there's a slight glazing going on. Got to make that lovely light blue up there work. So I'm going to take some cerulean, go right through here into here. My pinks here. As that water comes up there to here, and it's pink right through up into there. Down through, little bits of blue, different blues, warm blues, cool blues, so we get the effects as well going on here, which are important because as they're playing one against another and they're reflecting the sky. I'll probably have to let this dry again in a moment because I need to be working into drier detail in a minute, and suddenly the whole thing starts to come together. Back over here now, some darker areas. While it's still just damp, I can drop in these pretty dark. I need to rub away this masking fluid in a minute so I can see where my darks really need to go against the light. Right, now it's time to rub away masking fluid, and this one is coming away nicely, look. This is the Pebeo one, and anywhere else that we put it. Along here for instance, bits of white now showing through there. Let's see where else we put it. Take the salt off here now. See some of the salt effects we've got with the blotchiness there. You can always use a bit of sponge or other texturing if you want to, a bit of splatting it I want to do as well. Right, now we've got those back, I need to come back into this and tidy it up a bit. So this needs to be taken down, and I want to do that with just a thin coat of the cobalt violet, giving it a glaze of it here really as much as anything. So let's push that back, and then the textures and details on the water and snow and ice here. See if I use that dry brushwork there, again to give a bit more texture. These little marks in the foreground can just help to lead the eye in and give us this feeling of it. And I can start to make harder and sharper edges back here. Now, I want a little bit of texturing, so what I want is a fairly stiff brush. I just want to pick up a little bit of this grey I'm doing. I just want to kind of flick a little bit of the, like that. There we go, that's better. Just to give a bit more credence to the texturing of the snow in the foreground. Right, now it's just down to final details, the fine brush. Right, we're just doing some splattering with a fine brush like this to give a bit more texturing here in the foreground. What I'm going to do next is do the same with the larger brush, but with the hake I can actually come in and we can actually do some more texturing with the end of the hake like this. Okay, I've got some white designer's gouache now I'm going to use to a bit of splattering. Before I splatter, I just want to put a little bit of white back in to the main picture, and I will do that across just some of this as well, and just dry it through. A little bit of white gouache here and there, and where we've lost it a bit here, maybe not little bits, just bring it back with a little bit of white gouache, just tickling the surface, don't overdo it. Maybe a few up in the sky as well, against the darks there, just to give a bit more atmosphere, and across the sky too. To decide where you want them. Maybe a few up in the sky as well, against the darks there, just to give a bit more atmosphere, and across the sky too. We're just about there, I think. A bit more splatter here and there. Quite nice. Don't want to mess the sky up completely, but just to get a bit more atmosphere over here. Before I sign it, a little bit more splattering over here, just darks against the lights over here. Well, there we go. Take a closer look at it then. You can see all the effects that we've got here into the sky. All those mountain ranges and the sky, the wet next to wet, the wetting to wet, the light area shining through, down to this tree here where we put the masking fluid and then worked on later with a bit of white gouache. The misty just in between the mountain range with the wet into wet and gradually going drier and drier and painting more and more paint on. The rake brush to get the effect of the waterfall. Then the otter down at the bottom here. Across to the snow leopard. We went right into the textures on the snow leopard. You can see the rake brush work again, and then splattering at the end, the very end, to get some snow coming down across the whole scene.